Neil, can you hear me?
Yeah,
Good morning.
I've just done a big introduction to you, and we're handing over to you. I've done an introduction, so just kick straight into it. Sorry,
Cool.
We thought you were not on mute.
It's okay. Do you have the slides available yet, Nicole?
I'm circulating it to the board right now. It's just arrived.
Perfect.
If you can share it, that would be great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, all right.
No, I'm good to go. Apologies for that. That was unwanted stress at this point, but I think we're underway. Thanks for having us along today. Recently, our board wanted to do a deeper dive on the licensing system just to understand where things are at now and test whether or not there are improvements that could be made relative to the New Zealand situation. As you would all probably know, the graduated driver license system as we know it today kind of came about into New Zealand in around the 1980s. Today, in the time available, we'll cover off a few things. Firstly, why we have the system we have and what the evidence tells us about that. Secondly, issues associated with the system. And thirdly, what is being done to address them. I should say today's slides can be, well, they are available now, but we're also more than happy to provide the deeper board paper, and obviously any follow-up that AT might want with us post-session would be welcomed as well. So why do we have the driver's licensing system? And I won't read through the slides, I'll just pick up some of the key points. But fundamentally, it's that first point. Driving a motor vehicle is a complex task and it does require care and attention. And your safety generally improves as you become more trained and more practiced in the process of driving. In terms of the graduated system, it puts conditions on learner and restricted drivers, basically to minimise risk as they learn to drive and gain confidence in the activity. Through the graduated process, a driver's competency is evaluated at various points through the regime, and that's done via a testing process. We consider that the graduated driver's licensing system is consistent with international best practice, and I'll come on to that in a moment. And I think really importantly, the bottom point, coupled with extensive supervised on-road driver training, it's found to be effective with 20 to 30% reduction in novice driver fatal and serious injuries. In terms of evidence, so we're in pretty good company. We did an evaluation comparing to 12 international similar schemes, and they're across the US, Canada, New Zealand and Australia. And we found that, or it was revealed that the system has quite a bit of merit. And I think the first point of that italicized section is very pertinent. So among 16-year-old drivers, the median decrease in per population overall crash rates during the first year was 31%, with a range of 26 to 41%. A point that our board spent quite a bit of time talking about was the full license assessment. So this is the practical phase to transition from a restricted license to a full. And the final bullet point on the slide basically says what we know about that some studies showed that requiring a practical test to obtain a full license had positive benefits, while others were inconclusive. But overall, it said that practical testing at least did no harm. So that's one that the board has asked us to continue to dig into and come back to them with further advice, and I'll come on to that a little bit later as well. In terms, we can skirt through this slide pretty quick, but this is just the lay of the land in terms of how the system works. So as a learner, you've got to be 16 years old, you pass the theory, and then you have strong supervision, zero alcohol, and you've got to remain in that phase for at least 6 months. You progress through to restricted via a practical test. There's restrictions in place to minimise the harm and risk as you gain experience, such as not having passengers and zero alcohol. And here you stay there for 18 months unless you do a course, or a shorter period if you're over the age of 25. And then we've got the full licence phase, which is, as I mentioned earlier, dependent on passing a practical test, and then it has far lesser restrictions. In terms of non-participating in the graduated driver licensing system, so the reasons here are pretty obvious. People who don't progress to obtain a full license from the restricted stage have a higher crash risk. This risk is relieved by age and experience, but it's not totally eliminated. So age is not the only reason why less experienced drivers crash. People who progress through the graduated driver's license system more slowly are also higher risk, and people who breach their license conditions are higher risk than those that don't. So those that have a tendency to obey the rules typically don't are at higher risk than those that comply. Also relevant to that third slide is that often non-adherence to licensing requirements is an entry into the justice system, and obviously that's not a good thing. A couple of other things in addition to this slide. Young people in particular are more likely to have a restricted license if they work full time. So 70% of workers hold a restricted license compared to 34% if they're unemployed. So clearly there's an economic link there as well. Looking at the next age bracket, so 25 to 64-year-olds, 85 to 90% of those employed have at least a restricted license compared to 70 to 73% of those not working. So why don't people progress to a full license? So the rates of license holding vary dramatically by a range of factors. Deprivation index is one really interesting aspect. So 85% of those in the least deprived areas have a full license compared to only 52% of those in the most deprived areas. There's also disparities between gender, ethnicity, and geographic location. A Motu study in late 2021 determined that 20% of Aucklanders between 25 to 64% don't hold a full driver's license. This is comparable to Wellington, potentially because of widespread public transport and the high cost of parking, which makes public transport a more attractive alternative to driving. That 20% rate, though, does put us in the lowest, or Auckland and Wellington, in the lowest attainment of a full driver's license in the country. Other regions in that category include more remote locations that don't have alternative passenger transport, such as Far North, Tairāwhiti, Waitomo, Ruapehu, and South Wairarapa. So what's being done to improve access? So as you would appreciate, for some people, the cost to obtain a full license can cost hundreds, if not thousands of dollars. When you take into account the time taken, the cost of driver's license, the access to a vehicle, the cost of testing, and the cost of resets. So from the 1st of October 2023, the reset fees for all driver's licenses are being removed. So that means that if you fail, you essentially get to reset again for no additional cost on that. As a person who failed my heavy vehicle license several times, so that would have been welcome back in about 1987. But clearly this is the removal of one barrier, but there are quite a few other things that need to be addressed to support people to obtain full licensing. So what more is being done? So through budget 2022, there was a provision over the next 4 years to support 64,000 people into driver's licensing. And there's a variety of things being done here. So there's a cross-agency piece led by a ministerial group overseen by the Ministry of Social Development and includes Waka Kotahi. And this work looks at the regulatory and operational factors and requirements of the scheme, such as time limits and the effectiveness of various driving courses and other supports. And, you know, the goal is to obtain the overall quality and consistency of driver training and supporting small providers to really step up and support the people in the locality, particularly young people. Other things that are going on, we have the 5-year strategy to improve access to and progression through the system. So it's to improve delivery of services in the regions, review the practical test stages. And earlier when I referred to the board being very interested in particularly the practical from restricted to full, that fits in this category. And we have a focus on a couple of those regions that really do lag other parts of the country. So Te Tai Tokerau, Northland and Tairāwhiti, and really supporting people into the driver's licensing system that would otherwise face barriers. We have at the bottom there a couple of new roles that were strengthened to support community driver training and mentoring, and in Auckland you'd see the reference to Auckland North, Auckland Central and Auckland South. In terms of what we're aware and what we're involved in Auckland, so these are some of the interventions or the initiatives that we participate in. So working with the Regional Skills Leadership Group, Auckland Transport, obviously, police, and those other two mentioned. Would also like to acknowledge some of the work that we're not involved in. So there's great work going on in Glen Innes through Auckland Council and local marae, and BTNZ have an initiative in South Auckland as well involving local marae to support young people, particularly, young rangatahi, particularly Māori, into licensing. That is all I had by way of slides today, and as I mentioned earlier, more than happy to make anything available, or any follow-up would be welcomed.
Good questions. First one is, we went through it very quickly in terms of the maximum time license before that changing. And secondly, you talked about escape access, which I don't think we training centres in. How do you address that shortfall?
Go, Chris. I think the answer to the first one is you can stay in your restricted, definitely. There's no requirement to get a full licence in New Zealand and stay in Australia.
Would there be, if having a restricted licence, all your safety outcomes accelerate that through an incentive on maximum time?
So Neil and Chris, so this is why can people stay on their restricted, and why can we not incentivise them to get a full licence by having a maximum time on restricted?
There was a move to limit that, and when it came down to the wire, government elected to not pursue it. So it's in play. It's been in play, but it's not currently. It's not currently that's something that's being pursued.
So the rules on this are set by the government. They still sit at
Correct.
ministers, and the recommendation has been made to do that based on best practice, international evidence, but the decision has been made at a government level that they don't want to implement that at this stage.
Yeah, the one thing I'm not sure of, Nicole, is whether that implementation was simply deferred or cancelled. We'd need to come back to you on that one.
Just to give an idea of scale, what's the gross cost of driver licensing in New Zealand? In other words, going through the whole process across New Zealand. And I know some of it's recovered by fees. What is the gross cost?
Yeah, well, I'll have a crack at answering what I think the question is. So a typical candidate, if they're going through some professional driver training, we sort of put that number at around $5,000, including everything they're going to go through. Now, you can factor in other costs if you think about the cost of people to support them and the opportunity cost of those people's time, but $5,000 is a good rough order number to get someone through the system.
Thank you. And the cost of the normal parts is providing services to sit the test and do practical driver testing, apart from the fees cover.
Yeah, well, that was the slide that Chris put up just before. So I think it's around about $100 for your restricted test, and maybe about the same for the practical test. So it's in the order of a few $100s for the testing fees themselves.
Sorry, Mark, you also asked about what we're doing in those two regions of New Zealand to provide alternate driver licensing capability outside the BTNZ contract.
Yeah, so Yep, I can talk to that briefly. So the model that Waka Kotahi has run to deliver practical services over the past probably forever has essentially been a monopoly provider, VTNZ. And what we've been grappling with over recent times is that that's not particularly servicing well, in particular, very remote areas. It has capacity constraints elsewhere as well, and we have process issues elsewhere as well. But for purely access to the service, those very remote rural areas are particularly disadvantaged. So as part of the driver license improvement program, which the main aim of that is to make a case for wider system change. But as part of it, we initiated these 2 trials. And what that did was set up what we've called a community driver testing officer. So we take people from that community, we train them to the same standard. In fact, VTNZ does the training for us. So they're trained to the same standard. They work under a community group, and they're able to test the people that go through those community programs. We've had good results from that. The audit informations that we've done suggests that that they are being trained to the same standard and tested to the same standard. And I'll just note that in the far north, we had an additional benefit there in that the officers that we initially had doing the work were serving police officers doing it on their community service day. And that's had some really excellent flow-on benefits for them in terms of outreach into the community.
So we've had hundreds go through, Mark, we've literally put over 1,000 through this alternate testing regime. So we've had several thousand go through in the last 6 to 12 months.
I think you have a question.
Thank you for the information. I think we received a report earlier circulated to the board around more information on this. I'm interested in your comparators to overseas and where we think that what we're doing is best practice. I guess in particular around length of time of the graduated licensing scheme and whether there are tweaks that could improve our outcomes. I guess an example would be New South Wales, where it may take 1 year on a restricted and then a 32 to get your full licence. And I guess the deterrent in terms of change of behaviours where young people have restrictions and can automatically lose their licence for 3 months, I understand, for breaching those restrictions. So I just wondered if in your research you felt that there needed to be any tweaks to what we currently have.
Not at this stage. We did explore New South Wales in quite a bit of depth, as well as Queensland, as 2 systems that are quite comparable, and they all have subtle differences. We didn't see anything that really caught our eye that would make a meaningful difference in the New Zealand context. We did look quite closely at recording hours, logbooks and the like, which is the feature of several other systems, but we thought on balance that our system was broadly fit for purpose, with a little bit of further work to be done on that back end practical test, moving from restricted to full.
Thank you.
So the point that's been made there, you're required to go and have another test to get your full licence in New Zealand.
Yes.
And there's not a lot of evidence that test actually adds value. The problem is difficult to quantify because you don't have any counterfactual. Because you're either in the system and you've got a restricted, or you don't have a licence at all. And so it's difficult to quantify the impact of that practical test because of that issue. But the question that's been asked by the board is if there is a barrier by virtue of having to go through a second test, the cost of that, the inconvenience of that, would it be enough just to have people driving safely without any offences for a year or year and a half, and then they automatically, which is what some of those other systems do. Yeah. Yeah. So that's what the board's asked us to look at, and I think that's what the team is now trying to quantify.
So Only questions. Kylie, could I suggest that this comes back to the safety committee, just sort of,
Yes, sure.
like, where we do run some programs, particularly with my life, just to make sure they're really data deliberated. Thanks very much, Chris. Appreciate the presentation.
Thank you.
And thank you for the opportunity again to present the last month and provide some ongoing commentary. First of all, can I call out, you've got a very different board, CEO board report and format. Personally, I'm pleased with that, and I'm pleased with the work that Mark Chrissy and Roger Yuan have done to get this to the point where it currently is. But it's an alpha or a beta version, it's early stages, and I'd welcome feedback from the board on what you're seeing and how it's being presented. I will take it as read, but I want to highlight a few issues. You'll see in the general structure, I've got current operational highlights, so then talk about some of the operational issues and then some of the strategic matters, and I just want to draw out a few of those. As I look to operational highlights, really pleased that we got our annual report last week. You'll all receive a copy of that, but I don't need to restate what's already been said several times, but a good result from the team in a very unusual year. I just want to highlight paragraph number 5, Toitū certification. So we measure our carbon emissions, and we have an inventory approach that's audited, and we have certification for that. So this is really pleasing. It's our way of demonstrating that we're living our own promise. And we are the only road controlling authority with that certification, as far as I'm aware. So well done to Kathy Bevan and the team. Good to see the Mission Electric initiative continuing. You'll see there the Kinetic New Zealand Bus Depot electrification initiative with 44 new electric buses. And we're also working with them and other suppliers to accelerate rollout of further electric vehicles across our networks. VKT initiative, you'll see a paragraph on that. I've said this before, I'll say it again, we should not underestimate if we are to achieve those VKT reductions, what the impact will be on Auckland. At the same time that we will also grow by 2035 about 25%. And I've also said many times, transport is an enabling infrastructure, but this is much a spatial planning, urban form, city and regional design issue, and discussion to be held politically and from civic leadership as it is from transport perspective. So I think we've, I just want to keep highlighting that circa 30% reduction in VKT from today's numbers while we're growing at that rate, at approximately 25% is not the faint-hearted, and we also need to confirm LCP funding for the same. I'm pleased Eastern Busway is continuing to deliver against program and budget, and they're making good progress. So that is a very significant investment and one that we should be pleased with from an organisational board perspective. So thank you, confidence in what's happening there. Katoa Ka Ora, Chair, you touched on the politics of safety, and it's extensive, isn't it? I'll just reiterate those. I think the public debate on speed management is very interesting at a time when we're seeing increased death and serious injury. It's not satisfactory. We will need to think our way through this, because if I look at the GPS, we won't be funded to resolve it. I think that's going to be particularly challenging. There's been a lot said about the ransomware attack. Two things on it. I'm very pleased with the way the team has responded. I'll call out Roger Jones but he's not the only one. For the way that they give up a response, that they managed to rebuild an important part of our system. And no, we haven't paid any ransom. We still have a few technical glitches and issues, but these are things that you find out on the way through. As a bus user, I've also been subject to the same technical glitch and issue, but we're at the right end of solving the problem. We're at the glitchy end, we're not at the encryption end, we can't get the road system, and we're not seeing the release of confidential information. So I had a few technical issues, couldn't get onto my laptop. Violence, threats and aggression, you'll all be aware of the stabbing at Oldham. Can I just call out my continued concern about violence, threats and aggression across our networks? This really worries me. It worries me for our people's sake. It worries me for our customers. Probably it worries me most because I see a general lift in societal threat, aggression, violence, and we're seeing that play out in our networks. I was talking to Stacey yesterday. We have completed, and it's in draft to review. There are some recommendations. One of those will be additional transport officers on our networks. So we'll come back with some further advice on what we need to do just to lift our presence and to reinforce a safe environment. That's not to underestimate the fact that we need some more support from New Zealand Police because we can't, we're very limited in the action we can take. A large amount of criminal behaviour. I'll just going forward, I'll leave paragraphs 14, 15, 16 for you. I'll take as read. You can ask any questions. Likewise, ferry accelerated training program. I just want to acknowledge that ferry service provision is emerging as a key political issue right now and a key community issue for those communities affected. Particularly, we've got a reduction in service. Talking with the team, my recommendation is we bring back a review for this board so you're refreshed on what our ferry strategy is. That deals with the longer term. There's been a lot of debate through the regional public transport plan consultation document about what will happen in certain parts of our network. But also we've got this very near term issue over the next 12, 18 months where we're training staff so we can resume services as normal. And then sitting in the backdrop of all that is the economics of ferry service provision. And I think it would be good just for our sake to benchmark where we're at. There's a lot of inflation of different issues. And that we would also, I'd suggest that as an open. We'll touch on what some of those contractual terms and conditions are, where they're not great confidence, and we take the same report to transport infrastructure and open as well. Otherwise, I'll take the balance of the other items here is read through strategic challenges. I think I've touched on a number of them that you'll be familiar with, except for paragraph 22. LTP funding, we commence workshops with council starting tomorrow, then on the 10th of October and following, where we are starting to present what the strategic issues and challenges are as we look forward to the operating cost of delivering the public transport service and the capital cost of supporting the same. Both are significant and both impact council finances. You're familiar with those. We brought them to you. You'll see a dashboard, which I'll just draw you right to. The call outs would be those items in red. DSIs we've talked about. We've seen an uptick. That's not uncommon across other countries or cities at a time when post-COVID we're seeing that lift in risk-taking behaviour. We have not met, albeit by a small margin, but we've not met our procurement with Maori-owned businesses, so we're taking action on that. And our capital delivery is just very slightly under what we targeted year to date, but we're very early in the year to date. So I'm satisfied that we will make up that difference. Otherwise, happy to take any questions, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Dean. Yes, format. Much easier to read and get a lot out of it. So well done, making progress. Board members, any questions?
Yeah, look, firstly, just well done on the report. I think a particular focus needs to be survival, which we will ultimately get measured by our shareholders. Also, just to call out the improvements in particularly public transport buildings. One thing I am worried about is that page 35, just that graph showing us perception of 18 that we aren't listening.
Yep.
And that, you know, Kate's presentation this morning is still going to ring in my ears as to how genuine our consultation is. And the perception is going backwards from over the last 18 months from 36 down to 20%. That's the stat that really worries me. That's our social license to operate. Don't know how we reset directly.
Thank you, Mark. I've just got here when I looked at this one and reflected on it. We have just got a lot of work to do in this space, and I acknowledge that. I mean, the stats tell the story. Is trending absolutely in the wrong direction. I'm happy. Rather than talking to what I think solutions are, I prefer to come back and say what are the things that we're going to do to address this. What are the mitigations? What are the actions? And there are a number, but yeah, we've just got to turn that curve around.
Firstly, I think your report is, sorry. I think the report is really good, Dean. So I just want to acknowledge the work of the team. It's not easy to get trend lines that long and all of those things you've done there. So that's really good job. I think there's a couple of really interesting trends in there. One is quite a marked change in commuter behaviour that we're seeing quite locked in. One is this use of private vehicles. We're still below on both cycling and public transport levels from 2019. So what's happening is people are not commuting to public transport at, you know, the levels pre-2019. What they're doing is staying at home more, right? It looks like that. So just getting some clarity about that, because that's quite a fundamental change from a transport planning perspective. And what would that look like if it was extrapolated over time, that change that we're seeing? The second one is two things. One is the resurfacing is a little bit worrying. The second one is when you look at sorry, I'm just going back to the report, the capital program, which is on page that is the last one in the report. Is that dollars spent as opposed to projects delivered? Because in later reporting, we have quite an under-delivery on cycling projects and quite an under-delivery on some of our capital projects. So I think that's the dollars as opposed to the actual projects. So should we have both?
We can definitely look at doing both. Yeah. Can I have a think about that? There's a link between dollars spent and essentially unit value, isn't there? For outcome delivered. So we've talked about this before. I'd like to have a look at how we do that meaningfully without creating a monster. If it's just individual projects, it might be one way of handling it. Can I reflect on that and what is an effective way of measuring both dollars spent and outcome delivered? Yeah, thank you. Just touching on you had a sorry before that you yeah, there is an interesting relationship, isn't there? We've seen we've got a stubbornness around our return to passenger movements, boardings, sitting around that 84-85% or thereabouts. We've got more customers using it, but it's using it less frequently. You're seeing the average number of people using arterials go down, and our increase in active modes just isn't turning up. So we've got to, if you look at those three metrics in the round, they're telling you people are spending more time at home and less time moving around the city. That might be a useful thing from an emissions perspective, but we're not seeing there's other consequences with that. So look, we need to reflect on that and think it through what it means in the round. What it does make is it makes achieving our emissions reduction plan very challenging if we're not getting conversion from cars to active modes or public transport. So those are the two levers we've got really to drive that. Having said that, less movements, not a bad result either.
Thank you, Dan. You raised the vehicle flawless program, which is what the program attended a briefing to the group earlier this week. There were 3 board members present, but only 2 councillors, which worries me, because what comes out of this process, and there's a lot of excellent work being done, is going to be very confronting in terms of scale and pace. And so, we're talking about mass actions, not corridor by corridor, to get anywhere near the kind of UKT reductions, and still grappling with how do you take Aucklanders along the journey. So it's really worthy of our attention. I'm still worried that we're going to arrive at decision time in November, and those are going to have to sort of endorse or not endorse this thing are not going to be prepared. It was difficult to grasp from the presentation yesterday, just the scale of what's coming down the line at us. It's turned all over again, really. So, but just Jenny, if there's some way that we can get some interim heads up that sort of helps that understanding of what we're dealing with here. I'm not criticising the work. I think there's some really great thinking coming through, but it's what it means at the end of the day. Yeah.
Through you, Chair, you made that point quite clearly, stay on the reference group. So I'll catch up with the team once.
Chris.
Thanks, Dean. Just in terms of the perception of this, and whether transport is listening or not, and if you are bringing some information back to us in a more focused way, I'd be interested in understanding, what we are currently doing and where we're failing in that, or where we're being told we're failing. And looking at tools that are becoming a lot more common now, like the deliberative and participatory processes that many jurisdictions are now starting to embrace. And I understand that we will still have to rely on the statutory processes where the law requires us, but I'm interested in other tools and other mechanisms, and also whether we have the resource you've undertaken your restructure. I'm interested in the people support, the place support within this organisation that might take us on a different journey in listening to Aucklanders, hearing from Aucklanders, being guided by Aucklanders, and for us to make our decisions. For me, it does all contribute to the culture we set of our organisation, and having Aucklanders buy into the direction that Auckland Transport is guiding, or Auckland Council is guiding us on. So I think this is really quite fundamental work that needs to be undertaken because it really underpins just about everything we do. Ultimately, we're delivering for customers, and hopefully the customers will own those end outcomes.
Councillor Darby, I'm happy to come back. As I alluded to before, I think we need to refresh that engagement approach so that people do have confidence in our system. What we also know that measure is a perception measure that doesn't just reflect on Auckland Transport, it reflects on confidence of Kiwi Rail, it reflects on the confidence of Waka Kotahi, of Auckland Light Rail, it reflects what the mayor says. It's this perception rating of confidence in the system. And so we own a very big part, an important part of that. And we need to address that. But we operate in a complex environment. Absolutely committed to us doing our part superbly, of which citizen assemblies, deliberative forums, how we use local boards, engage with them to build local public transport plans, how we engage with individual developers or parties, all part of that equation. So I acknowledge all of that, and in fairness, we're thinking through all of that as well, but we'll bring something back to.
Sorry.
Thanks, Wayne. Just before we move it, thank you very much for the report. Really, really great to be able to see a one picture kind of view of what we're trying to achieve. One comment and one question. One thing to think about is a lot of our community comes and presents on things that they're very passionate about. And I guess somehow we need to allow, the community to see the progress that we are making. And I'm not sure whether that somehow comes into this report. So for instance, community groups who come and, give us feedback on certain projects, how do they see that we are making progress? This is very high level, which is exactly what I want, but we need to bring the community along, and I just thought that was worth considering in terms of how we report on that. I know we do have stuff on our website, but just how we capture that. My question is, what do we have? Do we have work streams behind each of these measures? I guess I'm particularly interested in the Māori outcomes and not meeting it. I think we need to have greater visibility because there are some measures that we are not meeting regularly, and unless we understand those work streams, I'm concerned that might carry on. Nicole's already mentioned the delivery of cycleways. I'm worried about these Māori outcomes in terms of procurement. It's not huge, yet we're still not meeting it.
Thank you. When we received the gift of the SOI, we did break it down into work streams. So most of the responsibilities been allocated. When I reflect on the SOI and I reflect on the structure that's being proposed, it's also very clear where accountability sits for delivery against these. So my expectation is it'll be nice and straightforward. Okay. Across all of these measures. Sometimes it'll be slightly complicated because there'll be more than one, but generally speaking, we've got clear accountability. But right now, the organisation has taken these SOIs. Stacey did a good piece of work with Alison PLT and our senior leadership team, along with others, just to build that out. So, my confidence that we're clear, and I think the power of reporting on also focuses on
Do I have a second? Thank you for that. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. It's carried. The second, the next item, climate change and sustainability, in official paper. Just felt that the standing item needed some shaping up and some structure in the time frame. So this is what official paper says. That's what we're going to do. And being advised by the email this morning that we're filling in a full workshop on this on the 17th of October. Because there's a lot of things happening. It's just about pulling it together and making it visible that it's all connected and working. So do you want to say anything else?
Yeah, just briefly, Chair, thank you. The is all driving towards a standing agenda item on the board agenda every month. But as the Chair mentioned, there's a lot we can talk about in this space. So we want to workshop with you some ideas about, is it a dashboard or is it a report on the internal portfolio work as to what's happening each month? We might have a look at what some of the other large organisations do in terms of bringing this sort of information to their boards and issue some exposure to that as well. And the workshop will really just play through some of those things and with a view to getting your view on the level of information you want to receive.
We did. Was this a consulting group we used helping out? Lost track of that as well.
KPMG did a lot of help with us on developing their sustainability strategy. So we'll come back to that. Yeah, these are that basis.
Questions?
Thanks, Chair. It's great to see this now, and I don't want to sound impolite, but it should have been here a long time ago, a very long time ago. And I'll leave that there. Just in terms of moving forward and the ongoing governance engagement on this, I'm hopeful that this starts to get us to the pointy end of discussing the actual actions we need to take place, that we need to lead on. Because climate change is a big subject, I'm hopeful that we're not talking about climate change globally. We're talking about the actions that we need to take with urgency here in Tamaki-Makaurau. Is that going to be the focus?
That's what we'll workshop on the 17th. That's certainly an option we can put forward in terms of the scope of what we talk about and how we run the conversation each month. But it's definitely, it'll be focused for you. We take that approach. So we'll talk through that on the 17th.
Thank you for getting this on the agenda. I appreciate it, as I totally concur with Chris. I am very interested in, and I know we'll talk about it in the workshop, but an overview of what we are or aren't doing, and whether that's a dashboard or how we do it. I guess in this paper, I was a little bit concerned around where we talked about discussion items coming to the board. I think we have done that, but I really want us to be accountable for an overview of constant and asking ourselves, are we doing enough? So one-off items to the board, I don't think is good enough. I think that we need to possibly a bit like the safety dashboards. Yeah. So I know we'll talk about it in the workshop, but I'm very much think that we need to hold ourselves to account in terms of how much or how little we're doing.
That's good to lose there, Jenny. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye.
Future Connect.
Oh, and Cherry, happy if I stay here or don't be on the hot seat?
Other teams here.
All right, directors, this is a conversation about Future Connect. We had a good discussion about this at the DDC last week. The intention was to bring Future Connect to give some of the new board members some exposure to what it actually is and the value it has for us as a network planning tool. And also to just expose you to the updates that the team's done most recently on the tool. So Tim gave you a good run through at the DDC. One of the issues that you did raise was, well, the reason we're bringing it to you for approval is the perception of when it's released, how it's perceived and how it's received by the community and how it might be confused with other plans and strategies out there. And that was something that the chair raised, that we asking our people to think about how we might brand it or how it, so it's not confused too much with the much broader joint transport planning group. So I might ask Andrew to cover that issue. We have to think about that, and then I can answer any more questions.
Thanks, Jenny. I'll just give a very brief summary of what this is, and also just reference Robin is here and Will is here, who really helped pull it all together, and Robin in particular, amazing work. Future Connect is one of the most important tools that we have at AT. It's used by teams all over the organisation and beyond. So the consents team use it to assist with their development considerations. Property use it to inform things like building line restriction removals. Design standards using it to inform design work. Council use it to help inform land use planning. Consultants and developers use it to get a sense of what we're thinking and what the future is about. It's setting out the modal role of each road, street and corridor in the region. And what it will look like looking ahead 10 years, although with cycling and micromobility, it's more of an aspiration. And then analysing each of those corridors to identify where there are opportunities, where there are deficiencies for each mode, and also for safety and environmental reasons. And then providing almost like a voice of the network style view on what we should be looking at further or investigating further to make sure our transport system is working better over the coming decade. This revision that we've done moves it ahead 3 years, so it's looking out to 2034 now. It's got newer and richer data sets behind it, and additional data sets. We've split out just deficiencies from also where there are opportunities for improvement to the transport system. And importantly, in addition to the safety and environment analysis, we've now added a transport equity analysis as well. So it's a richer and more holistic set of guidance around transport issues and that view of the network. It is important, as Jenny said, this is not the solution tool. It's presenting it's identifying a need. It's identifying and helping to inform other work that's happening, like ATAP, like the Joint Transport Plan, and like the upcoming RLTP, which are more about decisions around investment and solutions and next steps that take into account this network need and other things that come through as well. But it's about showing, it's a key part of that, the overall strategic transport planning framework that we've got at Auckland Transport. And it's doing that very first step of analysing what we've got and what we're going to have in the future. So we're seeking approval today to release it. There are huge benefits within the organisation and beyond in having this information available. And I believe we can successfully continue to mitigate misunderstanding or differences in expectations, as we have done with the previous version of Future Connect, through the proper comms and the detail of how we sell it and talk about it in our conversations going forward. So we've been able to do that so far, and I think there's no reason to believe we can't do that more going forward. Thank you, Chair.
Questions?
Context of my comment is just right in the middle of LTP, RLTP discussions around planning and the inevitable conversations about what our role in that is going forward. I think there is an absolute lack of appreciation of that AT is doing, the sophistication, level of planning we're doing, and our internal knowledge. And we've had a run through this in a workshop, which was fantastic. This is part of the job that I really enjoy, because that all that knowledge is coming together in a planning tool. Now, I just really want to encourage you to get this into council and to the mayor as quickly as possible, just to show the sophistication we do have, because this is a very tool.
Thank you.
Thanks, team. Just in terms of paragraph 16, transport equity, can you just take us through how you've arrived at this kind of construct of transport equity? Most trips are short trips, most trips are local trips, most trips, the inequities are the unavailability of great footpaths, safe cycle route, or a bus that I can walk to within 5 minutes and catch to connect. And the way I've sort of read the way it's put together under paragraph 16 is it's a lot more general, and I'm interested in how you've framed this up to get to the nub of inequity, which is, I think, as I've described, rather than providing for my ability to drive. Can you take us through that? And I'd like to have some confidence at the end of your account that we're homing in on equity of access to public transport and active transport as absolutely top of the list, rather than rate access or driving access.
Absolutely. I'll do a short overview, and then Robin can take you through a little bit more detail about a specific question around active transport and public transport, because it's an important one. Unfortunately, because of timing and equity program, we're coming to you with this a month before we're coming to you with the equity framework. So next month, we'll have a much more in-depth discussion about the equity framework, which we've used to underpin this and work on things like the RBTP as well. But overall, what we've tried to do with equity, and this has come about through a long piece of work that we've worked with council and WK and others, is in terms of equity, we're looking at where the transport system benefits are not evenly distributed and where the transport system implications are not evenly distributed. Equity has a lot of components, and there are inequitable outcomes for all sorts of people in Auckland. However, with Future Connect is a spatial analysis, and so we can't map things that are not spatial. So for instance, people with disabilities live everywhere. Elderly people live everywhere. So that wasn't able to be spatially mapped. What we did was we used a proxy, which is the New Zealand statistics on deprivation, and looked at where there was deprivation as well as inequity, because that's something that can actually be mapped. Robin will just quickly talk to then the access issues, both from a local and regional perspective, which is what we have.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. Yeah, so we did look at 3 domains of transport equity in Future Connect. Local access, which is covering a lot of the things you were talking about, like proximity to PT stops, and also land use activities such as schools and parks and GPs and things like that. It's then also looking at what is the average quality of footpaths across the region, using a pretty fine-grained GIS analysis that actually gives us a really good view of which communities have poor footpaths on average, and also cycle facilities that are more efficient than in other places in the city. So we look at a lot of that in the local access domain, which is one of the 3 domains that we've investigated. Now, there's also the regional access, which is your access to jobs via various modes, and how those outcomes are distributed across the region. And we look at transport system disbenefits, which is basically the movement of others impacting your community. So there we look at things like severance, the absence of crossings, but also road noise and exposure to road safety risks to people in local communities around Auckland. What we're really interested in is where do poor outcomes impact people of high deprivation, those vulnerable communities that Andrew was talking about. We want to sort of acknowledge that those communities might need some extra assistance to get access to opportunities across the region. And we want those communities to be able to use free modes of transport, like walking and cycling, or cheap modes of transport, like cycling, to be able to get to places in their community. So we do take a holistic approach and look at, a lot of aspects of equity and how those are distributed. If they're distributed fairly, which it seems like most of them are, but still lifting out those vulnerable communities and saying, well, we need some extra focus there.
Okay, so you mentioned that there's work continuing. And so while we've got the highlights here, those three categories, underpinning that is work to be explored. Okay, and the board is going to be advised on. Yeah, okay, it's not. Thank you.
Guys, thank you. This is a really good tool. I think you're doing a great job here. Just an observation, a lot of the biggest inequity is on the outer reaches of the city, and you've almost got a contradiction in the safety and the climate and climate space, because this would suggest all your investment needs to go out of the centre of the city, and you'd be putting in more of your transport spending out into the regions. How does that work from an urban intensive climate? There's almost a contradiction in here, but between the desire to reduce the need to grow out and this presentation, which suggests all your transport investment should go out. So I don't know how we resolve that, but it's how we bring those two things together, your VKT TERP and this picture, with money, because this would suggest a lot more money needs to go into walking and cycling, PT, and all out further. And we know we don't have the sort of money that's needed for new networks. So how we bring those two together, I think, is a really interesting challenge.
Yeah, through you, I absolutely agree, and don't have the answer on that today. I think you're right to observe the message from Future Connect is intended to show us the opportunities and the constraints and what needs to be done. It's not, as you know, the prioritisation piece. That's the conversation we'll have with GPS and LTP and all the different vectors that we're trying to bring together the trade-offs are going to make, which I think is what you know.
Well, what I'm actually saying is climate change and equity are at some level mutually exclusive, because where you might invest is not necessarily going to be will have the biggest bang for buck from an equity perspective, and this sort of highlights it. It's something that we have to work through the, because I don't think I notice the crew here are not generally in consensus on that either. Yeah. But it's true, at some level they depart. And I think it's a really important actually in trade-off discussions. So how we bring out the trade-off discussion and include the money that's available for those choices, I think is really essential between the TERP work and this work. Because at the heart of it is there's not going to be enough money to do it all. So we have to consider the trade-offs and very clearly consider these trade-offs in equity and climate as one of the key areas, at least in the short term, where the trade-off is really, really important consideration.
All those in favour, please say aye. One thing. Thank you. This is the second iteration.
Every 3 years ahead of each ROTP.
Pick up that demonstration to how it's for us.
Something through to council. No, have the information through to council. Yeah, let's have a look at what might be.
Are we on an ITC agenda soon for this?
Not, but that might be an option we can have a look at. The councils will know more than I do, but the ticketing. Let's see what we can.
So I think it'd be benefit spending half an hour with the girls.
Yes, because actually this, what's in here actually answers quite a lot of the things. it has to.
Excuse me, Chair, we also offered to start to overlay the Auckland Integrated Transport Plan into Future Connect as a way of linking the variety of outcomes that we're understanding across Auckland with the with what that integrated transport plan might look like. So there is a lot of merit in getting this in front of Transport Infrastructure Committee and the Mayor's Office in the reverse order to what I just said. Yeah.
I think in terms of position, system, this isn't the plan, it's an information for the plan.
Yep.
So it's an official view of and where things are going.
And it allows us to also see where those networks are proposed and how they address the need that we can show spatially, because not everything can be spatially shown, which is your. Yeah.
It's also got a huge benefit.
Yeah. So
Thanks very much, Tim. Great job.
thank you.
We've got time and Jenny. A lot of people are around. Goes the last, we'll go out line. The important thing here is the interface between the strategic development.
We have this. Like I'm announcing. All right, so the team again, President Watson, Emma Fisk, who's the SGA Alliance Director. All right, I'll just do a quick intro, then I'll hand over to Emma and to Al to give you some of the conversation we had at the DDC. This is basically looking for the board's approval of the network, the strategic network in the north, and also the NOR strategy in terms of the route protection strategy. So at the DDC, we had a really good conversation in the lead around the options, and we dug in a bit to how the network was provided and the options that were looked at. And I might ask Emma to just go through that again for you just quickly so it can refresh your memory. And we'll make some comment as well about the things that were raised by one of the public forum about the link back to the future development strategy and the work we've been doing in collaboration with council to really align the planning here with council's future development plans for the area given the FDs. To give you some confidence that there is alignment there, and we are very much in tune with council. So I might hand over to Emma and she can do the rundown. We've captured the concerns and the conversation in the board paper from the DDC, so I trust that captured the guts of all.
Jenny, so kia ora koutou, ko Emma Fisk te Kuinua. I'm Emma, I'm the Alliance Program Director at Tūpuna Tahi in growth and my nephew again. So as Jenny said, we're here looking for confirmation approval for the strategic transport network for the North Growth area. That is a key part of the development of Auckland. It's a integrated network we have developed working closely with Waka Kotahi and Auckland Transport as part of the Support and Growth Alliance and with Auckland Council. In particular, it's been very important to work with Auckland Council because it's very tied up in the development strategy that they have for the North. We've also worked in partnership with the other council controlled organisations and with Mana Whenua. So the transport network in the north is primarily centred along the two key north-south arterials or key corridors. We've got the existing State Highway 1 motorway, which Waka Kotahi are planning to widen and extend, and particularly connecting to Omaharani Pena to the west. In the middle of the future urban area, we are looking at a rapid transit corridor, which again is a Waka Kotahi led corridor, and the Auckland Transport Network connects the two. It's essentially a series of east-west connectors through connecting things up and connecting across to the existing Dairy Flat Highway at west. So it's an integrated network. And it works together. There's a real opportunity here to have integrated land use and transport and to develop those town centres, particularly in Dairy Flat. So we talked last time I was with you in committee, we talked about the workshopping and option development process we've followed together in this area. And because of all of the moving parts, Dairy Flat was one area we actually developed really collaboratively together. We had a series of 8 workshops with Council, Auckland Transport, Waka Kotahi and Mana Whenua to develop the options in that area. And I think everyone compromised and met together, and I think it's a great example of what we can achieve when we work together to come up with something. These things are not working in isolation. So there's a real opportunity here to get it right and get that transit-oriented development around the town centres and along the rapid transit corridor, and also connecting to the commercial land to the north. So that's how we've worked together on it. So a quick update on our future development strategy, which we're really conscious is front of mind and very topical right now. I've actually been in contact with Auckland Council's future development strategy team just this morning to check where they're at and check for alignment. We've been working really closely with them. So we are aligning on the recommendations with Council's FDS team. We understand the recommendations their officers are making. And we know that they're working with the council, and that is going to the Planning and Environment and Parks Committee, I understand, next Thursday. So we understand the recommendations that are going forward and think that we have alignment there and are working closely with them. Council asked if we would align our lodgement around that decision making, and so for that reason we're proposing our lodgement. We've moved it a week to next Friday just to make sure everything's connected and aligned. Probably there's the work we've done internally and working with council to check that for alignment, but we're also very conscious that we need to communicate this with the public, with the landowners, with community in the Dairy Flat area. So there's an opportunity for us to continue to engage. We've coordinated our engagement with council so that we're trying to send a unified message. But there is a lot going on there, and we're really conscious of the impact that's happening on communities and the complexity of the various moving parts. So just trying to have a combined message and helping people with that process. So I guess that's where we're at in terms of the North Network. We think we've got a good recommendation. It's well integrated between all of the various organisations, and we are working with communities to understand and really, I guess just to finish, that we really do acknowledge the significant impact this has on landowners, on the community. We're talking about a big long-term change, and the value is in the long term, having a plan, having a joined up network and protecting it. So we see the value and the outcomes we're trying to achieve, but just want to acknowledge that that is a really tough thing for the people affected by that as we work in the area.
Thank you. Questions?
I've got one. So we had a submission this morning. A number of concerns, allegations were made about the metro station being in a floodplain, being inconsistent with council. Can you give us assurances?
Absolutely. So you'll be aware we've spoken before about the fact that we have adjusted the alignment of that rapid transit corridor in particular, and it's moved a few hundred metres further east than it was originally. One of the reasons that move was made was to move it out of the floodplain from alongside a stream that has significant flooding impacts, moving it up onto higher ground to enable us to avoid those flood effects. The locations of the stations themselves are still reasonably flexible. It's quite long term, but we have checked that the whole area that would be under investigation is outside the floodplain, and we've worked with council to think about how we can connect up with the use of the streams and the kind of open space corridors for active modes, walking, cycling, and really integrating that flood protection with the open space. So we have done a lot of work on that. We've undertaken extensive flood modelling, and we're confident that we've made the adjustments required particularly in light of the things that have been really front of mind this year, and the design has been done taking climate change into account.
I'll just follow, because I don't think you answered one part of that question. Can you give us assurance that AT and council are fully aligned on this project and the outcome?
Yes, okay. It's at the officer level, yes. I don't want to speak for the councillors themselves because they've got their decisions to make, and I know they'll take that into account. But certainly supporting growth, working with Auckland Council's officers are completely aligned on our technical recommendations we make.
We had a meeting this morning, we just the opportunity of asking them if they supported Mr. Sutton's assertions this morning, or they're back to plan.
Right. We've been working closely with the elected members and the local boards in the area. I'm not aware of any alignment there. I understand.
Given the significance of this project, my question is the local board supporting this project, lobbying the local board?
So I haven't been to them personally, but I know the team has been to each local board because it sits across a number of areas. So you got Rodney and you got Hibiscus, and we've also been with the elected members for Hibiscus as well. Nothing's been highlighted to me that indicates that they've got any opposition. If I can check the report.
Yeah, well, it's not a post. In our limited expectations from them here, we are commitment making sure the local boards solving that. I find it credible that the project of this significance, we haven't spoken to them to get their endorsement.
Also, yeah, so we've certainly spoken a lot with the local board.
You can have their endorsement or support for this project. You can ask them to confirm today.
I'd have to confirm that.
Thank you.
I guess just picking up on that, so we had this conversation, I think, after the Southern ones, and there was a I guess almost a promise, I suppose, that when local boards resolve on these issues, those are brought to this board.
Yes.
To enable us to understand. So to sit here today and say, well, we don't know.
Yes.
I mean, we could probably troll through their things, and so if they have, and it hasn't arrived here, that's really disappointing, and sort of creates for me some issues. I guess some questions that I have in terms of how much is the preferred option for the Waitematā Harbour crossing driving this route, and what happens if that doesn't eventuate? What happens, and what is the risk to, I guess, council as an organisation in regards to that?
So we've worked with the Waitematā Harbour Connections team discussing this with Waka Kotahi. The alignment we've chosen is independent of the decisions that are being made, but it is entirely consistent. Probably a key thing there is to look into the future and understand what will happen in the long term, but also check we're consistent in the short term. So in the intermediate case, this alignment connects to the existing Northern Busway at Albany and can extend as a busway. It would also be either able to continue as a busway or to be converted to other modes such as light rail, some kind of other rapid transit corridor. So it leaves the options open. The current Waitemata plan has both a busway and a light metro, a rapid transit corridor converging at Albany, and it could continue past that on either mode. So we're aligned with Waka Kotahi on that.
Sorry, just in regards to the, I guess the risk to council, the financial risk to council, how much of that and how much analysis has gone into the actual financial risk to council at a time when our finances are, as an overall organisation, are considerably constrained in regards to property acquisitions and possible property acquisitions, and then I guess how much money are we expected, and Nicole might be able to put it, what are we going to be expecting from Waka Kotahi in regards, and will that be at the normal 51%?
So The financial commitment probably comes in 3 stages. There's the commitment for the next phase of supporting growth lines and post-lodgement. That's part of our contract. That's probably the smallest of the 3. Then there's the property commitment over the intermediate years. And then finally, there's the capital cost investment. So we're recommending that property funding be allocated in the next RLTP. So far, we've done all the calculations with the business case on what that property commitment is likely to cost. So far, the examples we have showing a slower uptake on some of those property acquisitions than we've predicted. So we are pretty confident about the cash flow over the intermediate years. The long-term financial commitment, what having a strategic network does is allows us to integrate with Waka Kotahi, understand the funding that brings. It also opens up the ability to work closely with Auckland Council to understand the development contributions and the potential to have input from developers as areas grow. So we've got all of those pieces in place. So I guess there's the standard Auckland Transport funding model with support from Waka Kotahi, but there's also opportunity to have further contributions from developers and through council's development contributions to fund the work.
If I could add to that, there is a risk associated with designating that property risk, but the consequence of not is the cost of that acquisition becomes greater later on. So this is a cost avoidance. And by designating, we can get the developer contribution policy sorted, so we can start collecting the appropriate funding for that. So we are mitigating part of that risk as well.
And Councillor, through you, Chair, to speak to the local board issue, yes, you did ask at the last board meeting to make sure we bring these things forward, that we are clear on what the local board is saying. A couple of comments on that. Sometimes when we speak to local boards, they won't tell us if they support it. Won't often get a kind of typical comment like that. Maybe we'll see that with the next one in terms of the Walters Road Crossing, we haven't got an unequivocal support or not. What I suggest we might do though for this one is to go back to the 3 boards, subject to your comfort and everything else, to talk to them about what their statement might be on this, in terms of what their view would be on how they would express it. You'll see in Walters Road, the next one, the board there has said they understand and they acknowledge and they know, but they don't support or will not support either way. So just getting that unequivocal yes, we support is not always possible. But I totally understand you need more comfort as to kind of where they sit.
I understand, but I think one of the difficulties is that through the mayor's letter, we've been given the responsibility to consult with them. I think there's a reciprocal responsibility for them to give us the view, sitting on the fence.
I actually agree with you. Also, that's a great point. So we could go back on that basis. And in the next week or so, go back to all 3 boards and ask them for something on this.
Be really helpful. We have the local boards have been submitting at our hearings and making their points on other projects, and generally in support and identifying particular areas of concern. It would be really helpful to be able to.
I agree with what Mark's saying to the extent that whatever it is, we should have a local board review, even if it's one not to have it. The process we've agreed under the better expectations is that if we make a decision that's contrary to local board view, then we state the reason for it. And so if we don't know what it is, then so Jenny, what's the criticality of timing on
So this feeling to the working universe.
I'm slightly uncomfortable where it's here today and the council's not considering the FDS till later. So what's the problem with this coming back in October? Should line the ducks up.
We are approaching Christmas, so what we've been working with council on is what is the latest date we could lodge and still notify prior to Christmas and have the opportunity for submissions and things prior to Christmas. We have worked with council to have a compromise that if we leave it till next Friday, in order to be able to work with them on aligning on the FTS, they can just still make it before Christmas. But if we were to leave it another month, that would move our notification until after the Christmas period, because of course we don't want to be out in the public domain over Christmas, and council has a shutdown period.
The consequence to us though is a delay on the alliance and a significant cost, which is likely to, I don't know whether it would be a shared cost or an owner's cost.
Yes, I mean, that's one of the things with an alliance, it's not a very expensive chain, they do a great job. Well,
I was just going to say, like, my understanding with this is a delay of this is about 4 or so months delay on the other end. So it's not a linear delay because of that Christmas period. Which is one of the problems.
David said something here being pulled.
There's an assumption being made that the FDS will be put through as per. So what would happen if there is a deviation in the FDS that affects that? You've got 1 day without any ability to contract to engage with anyone about it.
So I don't think we're assuming, we would never presume on what a decision would be made in committee. So we've actually developed a bit of a decision tree, working through all of the different scenarios and what we do. So if council endorses, or the committee endorses next week, then we lodge as planned. We've actually got meetings booked with senior executives at Auckland Transport and Waka Kotahi Thursday at 4 and Friday at 9 to review in case there is anything unexpected that comes up that we need to deal with immediately. If there was a really significant wholesale change, we would need to pause review because it would be pretty impactful to that strategic network. So we've worked closely with particularly at ATM Waka Kotahi so that we have the best possible way of aligning on program and still that opportunity to pause.
I think we're really comfortable in making a condition of the approval today that we get local board input on the decision. I mean, it is obviously subject to the alignment we've already through the processes, so the FTS process and so on. But there is quite a cost of delay there.
We'll do that for another month.
Which it would depend on when the local boards are meeting, and we could go back and do a check about what sort of stuff the public would have been doing.
Yeah, because I have, if we had a condition on that, come back, then it's like, your
support.
Well,
I think there's a difference between a local board view and local board support.
I guess I'm just reluctant to speak on behalf of a local board and say they have to support it if that's not something we have documented. We have worked with them extensively. We've been meeting continuously, and no significant concerns have been raised. I guess there's a next step to say, do you actually support it? And I wouldn't want to speak on behalf of elected members.
really to perhaps the Nicole's suggestion of if there's an UK subject to feedback from the local board, specific feedback from the local boards that isn't contrary to the ideas. If we can get their support in writing, absolutely. But I also noted what there might be reluctance to actually put in writing this. Bearing in mind, Mark, if I'm if we're going to start expecting view from them.
I'm here to support. I think it's helpful. It's been a long process. It's a multi-party process. So must be a lot of stakeholders. Well, so we are talking about tidying up process, and after that, communication back to the community, because there seems to be some confusion. But, over lunch, could you guys come up with an extra resolution?
We can come up with an extra resolution, and I still think our commitment as an executive team and an organisation to you as a board and council is that when we bring recommendations that affect local boards, we bring a local board view. We talked about this before. We still haven't quite got there. My commitment is we do it, so I apologise it hasn't happened in this instance. I'm pretty clear that that is a requirement, so we'll continue to repeat that back through the organisation. We're not asking if they don't support it, that's okay. If they tell us they don't support it, they tell us why. at least you're informed from a governance perspective and decision making. So we'll double down on that commitment and we'll look, I'll work with the team, we'll understand how quickly we can get that view from those local boards. You just need to decide what sort of decision you can make now, degree to which it's caveated.
Yeah, just, I echo those concerns that the chair and deputy are making there. Hearing from local boards, I mean, it has to be formalised. There's nothing that matters other than a resolution of the board. If it's just informal chit chat, that will not guide us. So it has to be a paper that is put on the agenda for them to make it formal. And that is our record, and that comes back to us. That's what we need to do. I notice on attachment 5, there's a lot of elected member engagement, but we're missing what's really critical, which is their decision. So can I just go to attachment 3? There's a lot of heroic numbers and lots of arrows up there, and I'm struggling to work all that out. How has that been arrived at? It looks like it's very convincing, but I'm very interested in, how those directions and percentages have been arrived at. Is there a well-founded science and mathematics sitting under that?
This is the one-page executive summary of our business cases, which are extensive. So we have a business case for the North that has supported by the various cases, so management, economic, strategic case. Sitting in behind that, there's capital cost estimation, traffic modelling and benefits realisation modelling. So there is a model sitting in the background that is tries to bring together, because the business case process, it's really robust and gets quite voluminous. So we're trying to bring that together as a one-page summary.
Okay, so sitting in behind that slide is a lot of information that would say that is the truth. As we read it now, that is the truthful outcome.
That's right, and it's gone through the business case process. Auckland Transport and Waka Kotahi have an investment quality assurance team that does a really thorough review of that to make sure that it's scientific and based in fact. And this business case has been through the investment quality assurance process and has been endorsed.
It is based on the modelling centre, population growth and other forecasts, which we just know have not always been endorsed by the council. That is what it's based on, which is the evidential base links to Stats New Zealand data, based on what we actually see in traffic flows, based on what's in the planning future forecast for those regions. This is the midpoint, the conservative. It's not the strong growth projection. It is the mid.
We do sensitivity testing.
Right. So this is, and I would suggest there's an upside risk on this as opposed to a downside risk, given that all of our forecasts have underestimated growth.
Discussion over the last few years, what with COVID and different changes in projections. So yeah, this is I guess a mid-range forecast on what happens with growth, and we know it's uncertain. It could go faster or slower. Yeah,
Extend the lines. With that lodge. Is that presumed that we don't consult? We don't put notice of employment, it can't happen over Christmas.
Right. Council, it's a shutdown period over Christmas, and we would need to notify with enough time for people to prepare their submissions in advance.
So we can't sort of extend the time for submissions allowing Christmas.
We could. It would still move the hearing. Because we've been working with council to try and get as much as we can out of the program, but the float is gone. So a move now is a move to the hearing.
I frankly can't see this one sort of before the October meeting, because
It's
pressuring three local boards to express their view.
Yeah, but
Right.
let's have a look at the next 4 minutes.
Well, I need to check with them.
One last one, paragraph 21. The combined AT or Katani network costs per household 156,000. It's enormous, it's a whopping number. What it costs to go green. But does that include the fine grain network or is that, it doesn't?
It's the combined network altogether. So the fine grain network, i.e. the roads in between the strategic network, we anticipated delivered by developers. And I'd say that the overall gross costs. So what it doesn't, although it's a total sum, it doesn't take into account actually some value engineering that provides up was to produce a property take overall. And there's also opportunities to work with developers to deliver parts of the strategic network. So yes, that's the total value. It is high. It's not dissimilar to other parts of it.
It's pretty well the values of this lines. Range was 120 to 170,000. Just experience and it was massive.
benefits of having a strategic network and a joined up plan is we know the true cost of growth, and that enables us to make those wise decisions between brown and green fields.
Yeah, look, what I'm getting at is, but I know that the developer picks up the local, but invariably there are extras required, and then that falls back on transport. Like this happens just about in every instance. There are extras. There are consequential. So when you've looked at other areas, what is that? Is there a percentage of consequentials that we end up paying for?
To clarify, are you talking about with SGA or general growth?
I'm talking, well, I guess general growth.
So in general growth, where there isn't a strategic network plan in this case, growth tends to happen in an unconstrained manner, and the transport response has to manage with what's available, and so the cost invariably go up. Those unconstrained growths drive impacts onto the network, and they are cumulative impacts, and our ability to plan and respond to them become constrained. So the only option we have then is to work with developers to try and get a betterment improvement. For example, if a developer is putting in their network and we know there's going to be increased demand on the wider network, we will look to put in traffic improvements, traffic control management. We'll work with the developers so that they can build some of those things while we fund it, essentially a dig once approach. So we try and reduce the cost of all times to the public. But there are always increased costs and in an unconstrained growth pattern.
Isn't that the point here? We don't do this very often. We are trying to get ahead of what we anticipate to be the level of growth in Auckland and plan and designate those networks to reduce the cost for Auckland. And this whole process, and in order to do that, you need to acquire, designate, etc., well before you intend to build, literally 20 or 30 years, because the price of the property will just continue to grow as more houses are built in those regions. So this is not only quite a high cost per house, but it is also the lowest cost per house that you're going to possibly get this for as Auckland in the next 10 to 20 years, because retrofitting, when it becomes brownfields, becomes a lot more costly, particularly in terms of mass transit networks.
Yeah, but yeah, just to that point, we're bringing a paper through the government pathways around our response to some of this unplanned growth. For example, there's a plan change out in Beachlands, and you'll see that the converse of the LSG is happening in those instances. So yeah, absolutely.
Just of time. So you're going to come back with a revised definition. Sorry.
But yeah, so future really is we've given you some feedback on what but it's wanting more specific resolution from each of the boards in terms of our relationship with them. So let's have a think about what that resolution should look like.
So we're gonna have a half-hour break for lunch. And we're gonna just take another half hour break and we'll do this. Okay. So what's that, Mr. Gray? Thank you, everybody. Here at 10.
Yeah, so on the issue of how we give you confidence about what the pre-election board's saying on. The guys have engaged with that we've run through their processes, what's missing in hindsight as a state. Suggesting a resolution be added to say that the board notes its endorsement is subject to receiving a statement on the part of each local board. 3. Expressing its view on the strategic transport network from providing the AT board assurance that there are no significant issues with moving to the next stage of project.
We're okay with us to proceed basically the message.
Yeah.
No.
Bearing in mind that this is the first stage of a much lengthy boarding process, and there'll be lots of opportunities.
I think that's the other thing we have to remember. This gets tested again. Really needs to resolve anything. Except for
If there was significant change to the future development strategy, we would end with you. So I think potentially.
So if they went that way, then the council would resolve, ask us to reconsider.
Particularly for Katahi, I think you've got the spine through a future development area, and then the local transport network feeds off it. So if there was significant change, we would come back.
We could add a resolution. Interim one that notes the words based on the
We add that the full notes that there is alignment between council and around the future development strategies. Council does not accept that strategy. Something that affects as well. So those two variations are we good to go? All good. Okay, all those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Yes, carried. Okay. We now move on to
So I'll pick this one up. We've talked about this at the DDC. This is a deferral from a decision a couple of months ago with some instruction to go back and get some additional work done with the landowners around the options for variable crossing. And also to secure a peer review on that work to give the board assurance that the proposal we're asking you to endorse to that is provided the peer review to the board, and we've also been talking to the local board since the DDC meeting. So Al, do you want to pick that up?
With the local board, sure. So I've been at the local board 3 times over the last month, and we spent around about 3 or 4 hours with them, taking them through firstly the board discussion, then secondly the peer reviews with a smaller group, and then we had a workshop on the 20th after to cover off the peer review. There are a lot of questions. I think at the end of the exercise they understood the reason why the peer review and the recommendations from both lines and come bridge option. They recognise there's residual concerns within the community, and I think the key thing that they identified in the memo is that there's going to have to be some integrated engagement that takes place with the community around whatever the decision is on the effective. And that should probably add a little
so back to you what I think's coming out of this. And being able to agree what's the best solution with the
That's right. So one of your instructions was the reconciliation process with the local community. So we spent a lot of time with our experts working with their experts to do some joint conferencing statements. I think at the end of that, there's still a little bit of difference around a number of the matters. There was some alignment in some areas, but on the whole, supporting growth still felt that the best option was the bridge and obviously the local communities, the underpass. I can take you through the key reasons around that if you like the difference of opinion. It is included in the report.
So, saying basis of selection. Adequate information in some areas, but the review has concluded that adequate information in which to support it. So,
that's right. So the peer review is reviewing the technical information that led to that decision making process. At the end of it, the view was that there's nothing material within the technical information that would change the spin of the options. So they'd still recommend a bridge.
So we are left then with a underpass option. Which works best together.
That's right, and I think that's what we assess with the multi-growth area analysis. What the differences are, and what the pros and cons of each proposal are. So what we saw is that the community certainly preferred an underpass, mainly because it had less impact from a landscape perspective, seemed to better fit within the surroundings. And obviously the community sentiment was that they prefer the underpass. When looking at the other technical reports, it's essentially dealing with that location where there's a high groundwater table and challenging soils, but around flooding of an underpass. You've got potential issues around trying to manage that groundwater and move it out from that side. There's also the impact on the main trunk line and Keeper's operations as well as the transport operations. So when you start adding all that together, as well as the safety issues around interacting with an underpass, certainly the advice that we're getting is that bridge is.
Have questions?
How many bridges or underpasses have we got to deliver as part of this program? Because I'm worried about precedent of the $8 million delta at the moment. Might only be the one, but you've got a lot of these. The issue we have then is multiplied by 8, 9, 10. It's not a $58 million pieces.
That's right, you're right. There is a program across Auckland that level crossing movements. And I haven't got the numbers exactly what they are across Auckland, but I think they're in the high 20s to 30s. The cumulative impact of that program will be pretty significant.
Long term.
And this circa, I think,
There's 5 in taken in. Yeah, there's a program underway looking at around 40 level crossings across Auckland. And the guidance that we're getting across from Victoria, they've delivered about 40 of them so far, and they've got the cost down to about $250 million, where there's significant grade separation. So there is a significant cost impact on any of these solutions. Just following out this discussion here, I think both options engineer a solution to the problem. Both can be delivered. Bridge option has more favourable qualitative outcomes. I think the guidance around underpasses and overpasses across rail are the idea really for safety is to eliminate any opportunities where there is a constriction of passing where people can be followed or seen where they're moving, and an underpass has less favourable outcomes than a bridge, neither of which are preferable. The idea is to remove level crossings, but a bridge would be a less severe.
Just when we do community and local consultation, do we break down our options at a per cost per household in a rateable value sense? Just noting, we've just had Marlborough do this in relation to resilience response, which they initially had over a $500 million program, but after consulting with ratepayers on what they were willing to have, they decided not to do a lot of road openings and road rebuildings and other things, and go with a much slimmer option on the basis that's what the community was prepared to pay as opposed to what they'd like. So how do we deal with the trade-off discussion at a household level in the conversations with local people?
I don't think we talk to the local board generally about what the average cost per household would be. This is probably different in this location because it is a existing urban area in local greenfield areas. But we did have a good conversation about the value of the project, so the east underpass versus the underpass, and the board did recognise that one was much more expensive than the other.
It's just really to note when individual households are aware that it would cost them twice as much, they tend to take the more practical and lower cost option. So how do we bring that perspective, if we're very focused on customer and community consultation, how do we begin not only on a value as like an overpass or an underpass, but also a cost? So how do we bring the cost bit to them personally? Because I think the different choices are made when the cost bit is.
Yeah, I agree. Probably that in the local boards with this up to is that we need some really good messaging. If the board decides to approve a bridge option to the community around the reasons why we've gone with this decision. And one of them would be the additional cost impacts of the underpass.
A good challenge to engage on another perspective.
I'm not proposing that we go to the community and ask for another 60 million to do it. Probably the I'm prepared to move in terms of the regulation for 60
million. Second, just without point. I've been involved in this one a bit deeper than I would have liked to be. And I support the recommendation. Yeah, the peer review is great, but just to take a learning out of it, the one big point, including peer review, was that some of our geotech work was should work better kind of back solve that. So,
I'd like to add a extra resolution which lodges and banks courses that applied to exploring alternative.
For me, I probably just need to be have the confidence that all the information was disclosed from our side to the community side in a timely way. Can you put hand on heart and say that all the information was disclosed so they could test it, assess it, etc. In a manner and in a timely way that allowed them to undertake their work to provide feedback?
I think we did. And the key reason for that is, if you recall, your instruction was for us to come back in August, and we didn't actually have time to do that work ahead of the board, so we extended it out to September. So we have shared all the information at the dance board, and I know through that process, as a result of that information, they've revised their design several times to respond to So I think it's been an open process. I don't think we could have done much more, spent much more time with them, and got a different result.
All those in favour, please say aye. Thank you. That one has no constraints on notification, does it? That one has no constraints on notification now.
I'm watching on the 13th, or the 13th.
I'll move to item 20 then. Which is annual report. This is, it's on the agenda because we are required to put the annual report. Discussion. Something we've discussed at great length already. Handle this, Mr. Chief. I don't think there's any members of the question.
I think it'd be a very short item.
I just reiterate again, I think the organisation's done. So, out of last year. Anyone, city realm.
Sorry, Chair, I was expecting Mark Lambert back here personally this morning. He was going to be sending this paper. He's not back just yet. Could we possibly just swap the safety?
Yes, we'll go to
paper with the CRL one, and I'll just go and check on where Mark is. Sorry, you got to find out.
Stacey.
Look, I won't go through in terms of repeating what I already have in the summary documentation. I will highlight a couple of points in terms of that. And we did talk briefly last month in terms of the safety fit culture section survey that we undertook. And whilst we had a very minor improvement in that, we had a substantial decline in the total within the time frame and with participation as mentioned last time. Right now, in terms of that, it did enable us, and we've had a workshop on this to be able to understand a little bit more in detail some of those key questions in terms of what materially impacted we were at. And the fundamental one, of course, is always going to be that the belief that all injuries can be prevented. That was quite low in terms of that. So digging into that a little bit more. That has a lot to do with the perception of what I would call the threats aggression side of sort of facing people and service people in terms of that. And that's what I call a safety event that can't be prevented, given the nature of their job. So it shows that we've got a little bit more work to do in terms of how we communicate that.
and what we need to do. So that was quite a good takeaway. The other one was really interesting. The other big one that's been materially impacted, I guess, where we're at today versus where we want to be, was that question that frames in terms of prioritisation in your job against those four things, and that was in terms of financial management, safety, quality, and customer. And so that did, in terms of where people prioritise safety and those four outcomes from the role. So that was another one that we have more work to do in terms of that, but there's also some real goal in terms of improvement made as well. Particularly around communication of safety, safety values, and in terms of tools that are available, and as well as the injury prevention and things like that that sort of come through in detail as well. So we're having more sort of detailed discussions at divisional levels, and also with our safety groups in store. And part of it would be a bit more in realigning some of the focus on where we need to go with that strategy pace. The risk capability module is almost done, and the risk procedures actually in peer review. And a learning review module is complete, and as well as their divisional dashboards. That allows the likes of their GMs to sit down with their teams and have data that's relevant to them that they can pull at any time within Synergy yourself, which is really helpful to understand weekly trends, daily trends, things that are happening in real time. The critical risk events you will see has had a substantial decline last month, and that actually was the same with public transport. Violence, threats and aggressions as well, which actually had reduced by 63% last month. But we did not start September very well. So, there is obviously substantial improvement that can soon be sort of overcome on a negative basis from the following month. So we're watching that sort of really closely. In transport safety, we've had a temp resource brought in to support some of that data modelling for ACC and Ministry of Health. That's sort of the next generation where we want to go to with some of those safety dashboards, which you will be seeing a little bit more later on in terms of that. The statistics as they stand at the end of August is obviously not flash. So we rolling year ending August with 56 fatal crashes on our Tamaki and Whātua roads, and 609 seriously injured. So that is almost 2 a day. Aucklanders that are either fatal or seriously injured on our roads. And so obviously it's not the greatest trajectory for us. We talked last month too about motorcyclists and that continually seeing that unfavourable trajectory on those statistics. And so out of curiosity, we just sort of looked at what those new motorbike registration details were over the last few years to see if there is a correlation with people using motorbikes. And yes, indeed there was. So from 2019 to 2021, there was a 34% increase in new motorbikes registered. And that trend has continued since then. So I guess that sort of demonstrates in terms of when obviously economic times are a bit more constrained, people look at more cost efficiency and their travel behaviour. And so potentially that's why we're seeing the correlation in motorcycles, but also seeing the correlation in terms of what's unfolding on our roads and the disproportionate, what I would call, effect of motorcyclist harm. So there is also some more sort of information team are digging to on that one as well, but there's some interesting data there. You'll see those local board views as well. That has been a really good tool for the team to be able to take out, and there has been some sort of target discussions where there has been interest in that to understand the data a bit more on a local level. It is definitely helping communities understand a bit more what's happening in the area and how they so I'll go to questions. Jim, thank you.
Questions?
Thanks, Stacey. Just in terms of the DSI and how they calculate it, that's on the road network. I'm just noticing, there's an increase in aggression. Generally, that we're starting to see drivers, bus drivers, and others witness greater levels of aggression. So where there might be an injury or possibly a death, as we had at a bus station last week, do those injuries and deaths show up as DSI? They don't come into that state.
No, they don't. Not where it happens on a transport station, not on the road, and obviously. Not, it is segregated, it's a violent crime rather than.
How do we address that? Because we're talking about, you know, the safety of the transport network as opposed to the road network. How do we capture that so that we know that and learn from that and can change our direction? And I guess the second part to that is when it comes to, say, the quality of the air environment. We know that air quality leads to premature, slow, no, they're not front page deaths, but they're thousands of deaths, you know, from poor air quality. So how do we encompass that in the category that I just mentioned? How do we keep visibility over those two categories?
Thank you. In terms of that, when we launched the safety strategy last year, we talked about different horizons. So first one was obviously to concentrate internally to make sure that our safety systems are reporting, we're getting really accurate data for our people, in FPC vendors, so public transport operators, as well as physical works, partners in terms of that. Then we want to obviously, and at the moment, this is a work in progress, getting that customer data that goes through the CRM in terms of what happens on our network, so we can understand that will be in time another snapshot in your dashboard here that will be able to see. So obviously understanding what's happening is really important to be able to solve an issue. We're never going to be able to solve an issue of that proportion in terms of it is a public network, it is an open network, and that's always going to have its challenges. But building that intelligence is really important for us to be able to, deploy transport officers, get the right police collaboration. And to understand where there's parts of our networks that potentially other tools such as technology, new CCTV, AI tools can help in terms of that. So that will never stop. We'll always be needing to improve that. We always are looking at ways we can improve that. In terms of the air quality data, we do have those data sets, and that will be in terms of understanding total transport harm and due course will be integrated. So next stage, MOH, ACC. In terms of that, what we can immediately get from that and correlate to that. And then we can bring in the air quality that will give us the, the total what I would call transport harm viewpoint. That's the goal with it. And obviously, that to further understand that economic cost of harm too, because that's really important when we have these conversations about funding, because it's the public first sort of where the money goes in terms of their prevention versus fixing people up. So that is definitely on the cards.
So we're building towards that fuller picture and reporting that. And you're saying it's subject to funding.
In terms of understanding that further, we have a temp resource right now that's doing the MOH and ACC data and supporting the team with that. Thereafter, in terms of bringing in the air quality data, we might need some support with that. We have obviously had resource constraints within a very small safety team to be able to do that. That's not a huge cost. It is what I was saying about the cost quantum and funding quantum is once we understand fully what the economic cost of harm is, it enables better conversations, because often there's a lot that goes into transport harm. It's a lot of money, so particularly in the healthcare side of things. So, working with our road safety partners, and we do have good relationships with the likes of ACC and our local DHBs in terms of that more prevention things definitely needs to be a core goal. I mean, obviously we're not going to have as much in terms of the capital side. So we need to really work well in partnership with others to see how we can support what I call more community wellbeing type initiatives. That's part of why we've been really focused on the data, because we didn't have that before. We couldn't tell the story. We couldn't get people to understand what was happening. And so by doing that and then layering it, bringing these different ones, and we've got a much better story to be able to communicate with people, and we can help them understand what's happening.
So
Just two questions on the information on the side of page 347. Graph at the bottom there with DSI. It's not clear what year to date that is, how many months is that number?
Sorry, which graph?
On the death on the blue bars.
Blue bars.
Bottom of 347. Is a year to date 2024 number. How many months is that?
There's calendar year today.
Months is that? It's not calendar year because they're based on financial years.
Change. Yes, it must be July, August. Apologies.
It's 2 months.
Yeah, it's 2 months. So if we're up 16 in terms of DSI from the same time last year. So if we compare until August 22 to August now, we're up 16.
And on the final page, the DSI by local board. It's easy to conclude that Rodney and Franklin, you mentioned how this morning is sort of the most dangerous roads, but it's not a relative measure because it doesn't measure how many BKT or how many kilometres of roads have got. How do we get a relative measure?
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right, absolutely not being relative because you're also not getting population in terms of that. You're just getting a regional sort of data view. And so we can chop that in terms of what I call statistics relative to occupancy of local areas. That would be one. BKT would be incredibly challenging to be able to overlay. We can do kilometres of roads. I think that's achievable, absolutely.
Thanks, Stacey. Dean just mentioned in his report around the review of the incident last week in Alderney, and I guess just listening to your update around staff responses to the DuPont in terms of the violence and threats and aggression. I'm just interested, we talked about police and our response with transport officers. I'm interested in your thoughts in terms of widening that group, and I know you do a lot of work around other agencies, and also you mentioned in the media about customers also taking responsibility in terms of reporting to try and make it safe. So I guess when our staff see that we have a really good response to something like this and really value how important they are, I just want to understand if we're thinking broader in terms of multi-agency. What can we do so that we try to ensure that this kind of behaviour, which is a societal issue, I think, is not normalised? I guess I felt us and police might be a little bit too narrow.
Got it. And you're right, it's probably a bit too narrow. I mean, it does require, further involvement and engagement of community groups and the like. Yes. I think you probably referred to that line, but it's not a public transport problem, it's a community issue that we need to overcome in terms of that. And dare I say it right now, we're in school holidays, we always see a spike during school holidays in terms of just certain sort of behaviours across the network and things like that. So yes, there's probably right, more collaboration needs to be done in terms of community groups and business associations, business associations, and we've had some really successful examples of where the teams have worked with business associations. I remember a couple of years ago we had an issue in Mangere Town Centre, and the Mangere Business Association got heavily involved with that. And we eradicated that through that sort of approach because it was community led, right? And exactly. Within the community, there's people with a lot more money than we got, right? Because and that's important to have that sort of engagement. So we do need to do more work there and sort of getting local communities engaged on board issues to help us out.
Stacey, thanks for the excellent report. Just a quick question. First one is about where we're at with bus driver screenings and the Second question is, are we still seeing upward trend in police enforcement? And have you got any insights about what they are seeing? And sort of those sort of relative volumes of alcohol speeding, that sort of thing, if they're 10 hours on the road, how many are waking up? Do we get any sort of data like that?
Thank you, Chair. We can definitely have those conversations and receive more information, and we can get that for the next meeting to provide a bit more, I guess, substance to it. They haven't obviously substantially improved their breath testing over this year, as you're aware, which is great. Still, obviously, a long way, I think, to go in terms of we would like to be with testing and proactive enforcement, albeit it has substantially improved, and we do have very good relationships with the local road policing team and do the collaboration on the daily things. There's still what I would call the police. I know have been working in terms of what I would call historically, obviously they've got a new structure in Tamakitako that is helping the focus in terms of what's happening on our roads. So they're not basically redeployed to other things. So they've got much more autonomy in terms of road policing rather than actually being set down to going and doing other things. So that is helping in terms of what we're seeing.
That's great.
All new buses that we're getting, they're going to have touch screens. So anything that was procured, I think we talked about that probably with the start of the year. So that is in place. So all new buses that are arriving that haven't obviously been specified, if one's just arrived, they've obviously been specified a considerable time ago, will be fitted with a new screen. We did have a conversation last week, and this is a national sort of smaller governance team on this conversation in terms of future funding allocation for potential refit. But we've got a conversation with our bus operators, will be 26th and 9th, second week of October on this. It's currently on the agenda. They're very keen to progress it as well. We need to agree what I would call is standard specification that we want them to be able to do it against, and that's kind of important for the system.
Did the the screen include an exit door?
No, they don't. Particularly not for a retrofit situation.
The new buses.
At the moment, the specification does not include that.
First of all, just I want to acknowledge just how traumatic it is to deal with those events that your team has done the last few weeks, and support to staff and other things, but people will be traumatised. So it's not like we give them a bit of support and then it all goes away. So just the ongoing management is quite important. The observation I made is motorcyclists have been, most of the other areas are relatively flat. Passengers and motorcyclists are the two areas where we're seeing quite a large increase. And I think you previously told us that you're relying on essential, ACC and others to run their motorcycling campaigns. Is there anything that we should be doing in Auckland specifically to target motorcyclists? And probably we need a bit more data, but to encourage people to sit in different places in the car, for example, as passengers. Is there anything we should be doing in that sort of space as an immediate response to what is quite alarming trends in those two areas?
Thank you. It's a challenging one to answer. Yes, there probably is. And so, you know how we talked about some of those local factors are too, and crash types. And so when we see that rise in passenger injuries particularly, it's because people are turning ones, and so the impact is on the passenger side. And so that sort of correlates with what we're seeing in terms of an increased passenger injuries. And with motorcyclists, it's the weaving in and out of traffic. It's definitely got a high correlation to what's being reported.
So both of those would be, at the very least, quite prime for some sort of educational campaign to Aucklanders, wouldn't they?
Absolutely, absolutely. So I will have those conversations to see what we can do.
Let's go back to my question about exit doors, because the national best practice is that have super exit from part of its feedback, if you get things on screens. They safety. So I thought we had agreed last year that we would have a combination of the weaknesses, combination of screens. Why is that not happening?
The specification does need to be updated to reflect that. So then you're right, that is what we wanted. But when I reviewed what had gone out for tendering, it did not specify an exit door. So that conversation is not done yet. That is something that we will be having because as you're aware, we're currently a procurement for a particular unit, and it's not in the base specification, unfortunately. But that is something that we can have a discussion about when we go through the negotiation stage. That'll be the first time. We have quite a process to go through in order to be able to update other guidelines for this. And that will be the start of it.
I would have thought would have been an international design standard national buses.
Actually, quite interesting that wasn't so when we asked fleet manufacturers. There are a number of places globally where you can see they do have that exit, but it's not what I would put for exit at this stage.
On that one, so. Okay. Thank you very much. Let's go back to the Ronald Pearson pipeline.
Mark running late, so I will introduce this paper. So this paper has been discussed at the last Design and Delivery Committee. It provides an update on what we, AT and City Rail Limited, are doing prior to CRL Day 1 to mitigate the risk at rail crossings, as well as estimates of the impact on road traffic. On Day 1, it gives an update on what we are planning to address the increase of road traffic and rail traffic on level crossings Auckland-wide, and the funding issue that we are facing. And it also provides the presentation that we delivered at the last Transport Structural Committee, 1st of September. Mr. Chair, may I suggest we take the paper as read, and happy to either run through the slides and or answer any questions you have.
Well, in terms of the introduction transport, what came through to me was councillors were looking further out in terms of what does this mean for community severance? What does this mean for road networks going to run? What's it going to mean? Bus routes are going to run with barriers about. There's a sense that consequences of rail patronage increasing, perhaps we're underestimating a bit at the moment. This program is about doing what we can do to get the safety case signed off to run the CRL. And as things patronage increase, then issues with different crossings start to accelerate. We have time to solve all things. So I think where we're at is fine in terms of getting there for Day 1. But I just wonder whether overall impacts actually going to be livable think well, frequencies and patterns really start to grow, and are we undercooking it, I suppose.
So, but as you can see in the slides, the impact of the CRL Day1 timetable is estimated not to be worse than now on the western line, the eastern line. There is an increase of downtime on the southern lines in the Takanini area, and that is why start progressing those four level crossings right now and not wait after the one, because we need to be ready soon after CRL. We are undertaking, as we explained, to mitigate the risk of a network system by level. City Link Limited are delivering 3 grade separation, crossings and one pedestrian in the core work. So that addresses 95% of the concerns. What we are doing is further work on pedestrian crossings that are very close to existing crossings to lower the risk, and that's part of our negotiation with the regulator. We are not a safety case holder. That's for Key-Rail, for Open One Rail, to demonstrate that their operations are safe. But as the transport authority, we are supporting them and by progressing those initiatives.
Just to follow on from Christian's point, so in terms of the future programme beyond CRL Day1, we've currently we've completed 91 level crossing risk assessments. So we're taking that network-wide risk-based approach. So we anticipate to have that overarching report with us by the middle of October, and that will help us to work with both the safety case holders, but also with working with TAI to understand the approach beyond CRL Day1 as well. So we have the programme that will get us to CRL beyond, but we need to bridge the gap between CRL Day1 and the introduction of the more strategic plan as well. So very much a work in progress, but it is purely based on risk, on how we keep the train network operating, but also the road network with a view to the road corridor, but also the trailers.
We are starting a program, we're starting local network plans for encouraging active RFP the relevant laws. Impact of this needs to be very much on that agenda as well, because I think there will have a lot of views about which severances are acceptable and aren't, and how the network some. Is this going to be included in the briefings for those local boards?
So yes, there are regular sessions already established now with each local board. So we're also prioritising boards that have the rail corridor, but we're also going over to the North Shore as well, just so we can garner that broader understanding of what community settings or community impacts may include. The engagement programme also includes plan of failure, water care, and also the policy provision, because one of our key goals again is not just removing the level crossing, but it's how we keep all of them moving at the same time. It's going to be an extensive programme. It's up to 30 years in duration, so we're aware that the impact of this programme will just in key areas where the level
this is incorporated into our business plan within the system.
Yeah, so this is the building program business case that provides the gateway to the level crossing funding mechanism. But separately, we have the level crossing single stage business case, which is in development currently. That should be completed by Christmas.
Let's back up your initial comment. I think we're underestimating the community feedback we've given this one. Worried of people in the social circle who are really worried about leaving home, dropping the kids to school, going to the supermarket, going to work, getting back home again. It's 5 of these sure can be closed. So I think feedback, the pushback you're going to get, and computation of this, I think it's quite and result to communicate really well. It's a time on it.
And it's unfair to put everything on AT because part of the reason why we close them is because of the freight and the interregional trains. So
I understand, but I think AT can get the front of it.
You're going to be in the front lines, and I think that was what came out of the levy. More broadly about this.
Sorry, if I can just pick up, Chair, let's take this and then come back to you over the next few months. So I'll just think about the timing and what our overarching approach is. There's plenty of examples how others have done it. We know that. Melbourne's often cited. But let's take on the action now from identifying what needs to be done to how we will actually do it and take communities through that process. And I know there's a lot of good work, but it's just taking that and taking it to the next level. The only other comment, and Mark Lambert and I have discussed it, is that there is an element or an opportunity to do some placemaking. So when you do a road stopping, we're not stopping the road, there's an opportunity to do something that is part of bringing back amenity that might otherwise be lost. So we'll take on board, we'll work as a team, and we'll think about how we do this.
So we've probably not been fair to you. Well done on getting a plan. Work for CRL, and we know we were catching up fast with things like that. But I think we're just flagging that this is going to be the biggest Texas once it gets rolling, and we need to think about it.
You're right, it needs to be part of the regional transport plan that includes the placement key around 0%.
Questions?
Just a comment, obviously you guys are talking to Melbourne where they've got a level crossing program within Big Projects Victoria. A key game changer was the 10-year funding for the program and certainty about that, which would be give them leverage scale and reduce the average cost of level crossing delivery. So I don't know how you take this up, but I think that's part of what you should be looking for, because you're not going to get efficiency without that sort of commitment to a program rather than a project structure and, you know, continuity of, like, as a program, like a Road to Zero program or a climate program, you're going to roll it out over a period and be consistent, just to acknowledge that's where they've got the benefits.
Considering the scale of the program, Melbourne divided this into 4, and they have appointed 4 alliances for areas, so that's a smart way to do things. And management case will address.
Melbourne identifying the optimal solution for, I will explain also with the prioritization.
I remember talking about this in Wellington in 2005 when Michael Cullen funded the double tracking of the Western Line electrification of the Auckland networks, and we're still talking about it.
Yes. And like Melbourne, the Western Line is mainly on a slope, so it's very hard to build a bridge because you don't know where it will land or return upwards. That's the.
It's more costly and harder. You're really going to still do it at project level. I mean, the point is, they haven't only just got efficiency on the project delivery, they've been able to deliver multiple outcomes that are important for Melbourne. So they've built their tier 3, 4 contractors with that. They've been able to build in massive innovation and they've reduced the average cost. So the advantage of the program structure here would deliver multiple outcomes the council and NAT are after local contracting, scale, efficiency. So it's how we together position this as something that politically should be invested in over time is really important for for the region and give it funding over time. Like, look, instead of these extra things we do, like it's a core part of what we do.
Social license to do that.
All right, thank you very much. Steve, your report.
Very much.
Right. I think that concludes the. I suggest we take a 10-minute break. Come back to the close.